Good afternoon and welcome to Community Candor, Wealthy Wednesday. Today's show is hosted by Communities First Inc. and sponsored by Fifth Third Bank. We are happy to be with you today, focusing on building a legacy with a strong foundation, financial planning, and investments. If this is your first time joining us, please look for the link on the screen as well as in the comment section for registration so that any information that's shared during this session we can share with you. Also, we select a gift card winner during the presentation, so make sure you register and also participate. Ask your questions in the live comments because we will be looking for folks that are registered and for folks that are participating to win those gift cards. So without further ado, let's get this session started. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. Please check out our website. We have 2 prior sessions that we hosted over the last couple of weeks focused on credit repair and budgeting, savings, and building an emergency fund. So please check those sessions out when you have a chance. And as I said, this session we're going to be talking about financial planning. We've got a great panel here of speakers. My name is Renee Kent. I'm the Special Projects Manager for Communities First. And let me start with Antonio Stokes, who's going to share a little bit about his background. Go ahead, Antonio.
Thank you, Renee. My name is Antonio Stokes. I am a financial advisor. I have a unique path and background. I'm born and raised in Paducah, Kentucky. Transplanted to this great state of Michigan in 1985, where I graduated from Saginaw High School. I went on to attend University of Michigan after that, Wayne State University, and then the University of Detroit Mercy to complete a couple of master's degrees before really, launching my financial career, starting in banking, community banking out of Farmington Hills. All the way to the largest banks in the world, from Citibank, Bank of America, Chase, and now I'm an independent financial advisor. I run my own boutique shop here in Oak Park, where I specialize in investments, mortgage, tax, and small business consulting. I'm married with 22 years. I'm still trying to catch my new mentor that's joining us. I have 2 children. One just graduated from high school, and the other is a junior this year. I'm an avid golfer, lover of kids and youth sports, charities, and education.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'll turn the floor over to Bill Moeller. If you would care to share a little bit about your background.
Sure. Be glad to. And Antonio's the kind of guy that I would want to go to, by the way, to do some work if you had something that seemed appropriate for him. As far as I'm concerned, I am retired. I was a financial advisor for 61 years. Started in Detroit with a regional firm and moved to Flint 61 years ago. I am married and I have 3 kids all around, and in Washington and 2 in California, and several grandchildren. And just 2 weeks ago, I got to brag, we got our first great grandson. So anyway, I specialized when I was in the securities business, both in retail and some institutional, but mainly retail. My background was I got a bachelor's degree of BBA from the University of Michigan Business School, and also a master's from U of M Business School, and a investment program a certificate from the Wharton School of Finance at the University of Pennsylvania. I belong to the Financial Analysts Society and the Financial Analysts Association. I was on President Ford's advisory committee on inflation. Right now, we don't need him, but we may in a couple of years, I think. And the company I retired from was Raymond James here in Flint. My wife and I have been very active in the Flint community. And we love it here, and the people here are so open, and we tried to do a good job for everybody that we came across. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. And I'd like to turn the floor over to Glenn Wilson to introduce himself as well as talk about this series. Glenn?
All right, thank you so much for Renee. So thank you. I'm Glenn Wilson, President and CEO of Communities First, Inc. The reason why Community Candor is here is because of our wonderful Special Projects Manager, Renee Kent. We were talking about how we're going to respond back to COVID and some of the things that we were hearing from the community as far as things that we could do to address needs that people had, not only personal as families, but also with small businesses. So she worked on putting together a great list of topics based off of feedback and things that we talked about to see what could come to fruition. And these things have been greatly responded to in the community, and they've been receiving thousands of views on all our social media platforms. And so we're here to empower, to give people a platform to learn and a platform to share, right? And so our motto is empowering people and building communities. And the only way to empower people is to get them the information that they need to be successful. So we have this great panel that we're putting together to make sure that you are empowered to have the information you need to be successful long term. So thank you to her for putting this all together. And please feel free to share this. Because it's not just information for you, but it's also information for the people around you. So click the share link on your pages, whatever social media page that you're on, to make sure that this information get out to as many people as possible. And then also don't forget to sign up on our URL, the CFI Building Wealth tiny URL link at different times to make sure that you get more information. So thanks so much for having me, and I'm so excited about hearing what we have to share today about financial planning and building strong foundations as well.
Thank you, Glenn. So, as was stated, the topic today is financial planning and investments. And this series on Wednesdays is Wealthy Wednesday. So why are we talking about financial planning and investments? Well, there's a basic formula for building wealth, and that is to make more money than you spend, avoid debt, and invest your savings wisely. Sounds simple, isn't always as easy to do, right? Because the ultimate goal is to create passive income. There are two types of income. There's earned and there's passive. So earned income comes from what you do, and passive is derived from investments. It's your money working for you. So let's talk about that. Now that you have earned income, as I mentioned earlier, we have 2 other sessions I encourage you to look into. With your earned income, you want to budget, you want to save, you want to build your credit, and you want to start generating some passive income from your earnings. And the common question that I've been faced with over the years is, where do I start? When is the right time? And so I'm going to open this question up to everybody, and maybe we'll just go in order of the screen here, starting with you, Antonio. Where do people start, and when is the right time to start putting together a financial plan and investing?
Well, one of my early directors, when I started on the investment side out of Merrill Lynch, used to say to us that it's always the right time to start the right plan. You start where you are. There is no perfect time. You know, if you could start investing as a toddler, as an infant, as a 6-month-old, it's a great time to start investing in your future. So what I like to, do is, I've had clients who have come to me in their mid to late 40s, upper 50s, I'll say maybe even early 50s, and they're stressed out about not having enough money to retire. They can see retirement down, a lot closer when you hit 50. And what I used to say to them is I said, well, let's just break it down into small pieces. Okay. 20 years, 20 years, $20,000 is $400,000. I'm not talking about investment. The first part of investment is sowing. So if you have 20 years to work and you put away $20,000, you have $400,000 in. Let the math do the math. You add some interest to it. It may be worth more than $400,000, give or take. So I said, is that enough for you to live off of, or is that enough to contribute towards your retirement? And it slowly, reduce some of the anxiety. So I always say start where you are. No matter what age or what stage you're in, there is a plan that should be executed at that point based on whatever you have in your hand, whatever you're facing, there's still a plan. So the hardest thing to do is to get started. And I think that's where I find that most people struggle with. So you start today. That's my simple answer would be you start today, no matter where you are, no matter what stage you're in.
Thank you, Antonio. Bill, do you have any additional comments?
No, I certainly would agree with Antonio, and I would say today is much easier to start where you are, because it used to be that it costs a lot if you only invested $100 or $150. Today there are all types of products that you don't, you can invest $50 and not pay a huge fee. But I certainly agree on Antonio's thing is you start where you are. I did take several years ago, I have 4 grandchildren out in California, in Santa Barbara, and I took them all to lunch, and because they all wanted to know what are investments and so forth, and what do they do, and so and they ranged in age from 9 to 15, and so we had a wonderful breakfast, which was supposed to be an hour and lasted for about 2.5. And anyway, that is where we started, and that's where they started. And then we later on, I'll talk to you about what type of investments they chose at their age, and how they worked out. But and the Antonio hit it right on the head. You start where you are, for better or worse. Hopefully better, and you build on that.
That's good advice. Glenn?
Yes, where should you start? Or when should you start? Now, right? And so that's the best advice that I can give. And I'm just echoing what Bill and Antonio say, but now is the best time. And I think they've already said it, but I want to say this is that fear is one of those things that really keep people from investing. Is that, you always are told, to hold on to it. And you have to get past that idea of, man, I can lose money. But the thing is you can always pull it back out, depending on the type of investment. And what you'll realize is that depending on the type of things that you invest in, they'll get an idea for your level of comfort. If you want to be aggressive, if you want to be very conservative, financial advisors are there for you to see what you actually want to do and what are you trying to get out of it. So if you're one of those people that's afraid of losing every dollar, when you go and you sit down and you talk to your financial advisor, you let them know, I'm not in this to lose money. And then they can try to come up with a plan. I'm not going to say that's recession proof, but is fairly light as far as what it looks like, as far as what you can do and your abilities to take money in and out of those type of investments long term. So there is success, but the success is starting now and start off with something, and then always remember that compounded interest does a lot better than it doesn't compound as good in your sock or under your bed or sitting in a 0% bank account. Compounded interest works a lot better. And I'll tell you this, it also hurts. It feels a lot better when you look at the market and that $10 or whatever you invested turns into 15. But then I'll tell you, sometimes it hurts if you see 15 turn into 12. But guess what? You still got $2 more than what you had at the beginning. So get started now.
Absolutely, that's great advice. So the common theme here is the right time to start is now. And I love Bill's comment, you know, bringing young people into that conversation, bringing kids into that mindset early as well. So we know we need to start now. Well, where do we start? How do we start? The first thing is to come up with some type of goals. You know, what type of legacy do you want to have? Are you looking at your financial plan based on a single individual? Do you have kids? You know, how do they play into your goals? And once you have an idea of what your goals are, then you need to talk to somebody. And I think that sometimes stops people because they're uncomfortable with talking to other people about their financial situation. They don't want to be compared to someone else, not knowing that everybody has a financial situation. And the best way to get to where you're going is to have someone help you with that roadmap. And so we've got a current and a former financial advisor on with us. And I'd love for them, starting with Antonio, to talk about what types of services you provide. What can an individual or family expect when they walk through your door?
You know, I really want to echo something you said. Everything that, you know, my practice is kind of shaped around, you know, helping clients articulate their goals. You know, that requires a lot of questioning, making them comfortable, asking the right types of questions to get them to open up, to even share with me, you know, what's really important to them. The more you understand, you know, the client, the better you can serve them. This is a service business, as far as I'm concerned. So once we can get those goals talked about and established, then there typically are two categories of services that they get on the investment side, or when people think about investments. Those things are what I call investment services, which are, you know, the execution of financial services, you know, like trading of securities, implementation of insurance policies and annuities, and other types of financial instruments. And the other category of services is really more advisory work. Advisory is doing the investment service plus the option of providing, you know, sometimes comprehensive planning and advice to the client. Again, if I have someone in their 50s or let's say 60s looking to do a certain type of an investment, I have to really spend a lot of time talking about not only what their goal is, but I have to think about different roadblocks that they're going to encounter, their health. I have to think about tax consequences to certain types of investments. And you have to do these things for every type of client. But when you're at certain stages, you need more than just someone to push the button to say, well, let me buy Amazon. Let me buy Apple stock right now. Sometimes it's not the right time or it's not the right fit to buy certain types of investments. So I would say that, you know, when they walk through the door, they're going to get advice. They're going to get I would hate to say regurgitation, but I would probably call it more of I'm going to show them what their goals are, what they stated to me that their goals are. And then I'm going to add to that some things that they need to think about. Hopefully I'll be able to ask some questions, uncover some things that they haven't thought about to make sure that we develop a clear picture of what their needs are and what their desires are. And then we add to that, again, tax advice. Different investments have different tax implications. So I want to make sure that I'm talking through how they're impacted tax-wise, healthcare. I also want to think about their legacy. I try to make sure all of my clients have a financial plan in place, a written document. Do they have a will or an estate plan of sorts? I try to make sure they have a basic estate plan before they leave my office. And then, if, depending on the size of the client, we may bring in, some more sophisticated estate planners, to deal with, clients who have, net worths, above $5-10 million or somewhere in that neighborhood. But you got, I think that when you walk in, you're going to get advice, you're going to get a clear plan, you're going to understand what I do, you're going to understand where your money is, and you're going to walk away with a written document that says, hey, this is what I'm doing, this is why I'm doing it, and if things change, as we know things always change, here's what I am to do, when things change. That's what I believe they can expect when they walk in that door.
Thank you, Antonio. And I just have a follow-up question. How accessible are financial advisory services? Do you have to have a certain amount of money to sit down and talk with someone?
Great question. I'm so happy to be independent now, so I can answer that question a little freer. No, you can have no money to sit down and talk with someone. What you'll find in our industry is that, sometimes getting access to one of the, largest, most well-renowned financial advisors in the industry, they may not be as accessible to someone getting started. Okay. So I like to, make sure that clients, they understand. I think everybody's entitled to at least that 5 to 15 minute consultation. It's a courtesy as human beings to just converse with people and find out what their situation is. And if as an advisor, if I don't feel that I can provide the service, if I can't be the best point of service for them, then I introduce them to someone who's more available for them, who may be better suited for them. So I would say from past experience to not be deterred by, let's say, that first no. They taught us to look for the no. So if a client is looking to talk to someone and they didn't get a good reception when they walked in to an organization, a bank or a financial firm, that's okay. Find another one, because somebody's going to tell you yes. Someone's going to take the time to at least get you in the right place. So I wouldn't make it about money. Whatever you have, there is someone who can answer the questions that you have.
And thank you for that. So there is no set amount that you have to start a financial plan or an investment plan or work with a financial advisor. The next question, and this is open. What is the best way, no matter what your situation is, whether you have $100 to invest or $1 million to invest, to find somebody that you're comfortable with and that you can trust?
Well, I think you interview and you'll some financial advisors you've either heard about or done some research on, or a friend might say, hey, this financial advisor did a great job for me and did a great planning job. You might check them out. But there's all sorts of ways, and there are directories. There's you can check many of the brokers out through a site called FINRA, which is a quasi-government site on, is this financial advisor or consultant, had any problems in the past, and it's pretty comprehensive. Secondly, I want to say that I agree with Antonio completely as far as you need two types of plans, which is what he outlined. Sometimes they're combined into one, but the investment plan and the what I call the living plan. But but you need those two kinds as to things. How do you get the kids' education? How do you get your retirement, and so forth? And anybody that you go to as far as investments go, they should offer a financial plan. If they don't, you're in the wrong place, and because they're just there to sell you something. And so that's the only thing I have. The one thing I wanted to just bring up at the end of my thing last time, I talked about my 4 grandchildren. I should have hired them as my research department because of course, my granddaughter had several dress companies, or two dress companies, but her biggest winner was Tiffany, and which we put $50 in each one of 5 stocks for the kids, whichever they wanted, but they had to do the research on it and come back and tell me what they weren't. So Tiffany was a good one, and then we had the best one. We put $50 in Tesla when I first started, and I can't multiply it, but it's up thousands of percent. And then the other one, it was Chuck E. Cheese as a restaurant, and then the last one was almost as good as Tesla, was Intuit Surgical. And he was very interested. His dad was a doctor. He was very interested in medical things. And today, he is a chief engineer at Intuit Surgical because of his stock ownership. So it's kind of cool. But yeah, the other thing, and Antonio sure touched on it, that whatever plan you have, whether it's divided into 2 or whether it's 1, it has to be a living plan that can be changed. So if somebody comes into you and says, I want to buy a cottage in Palm Beach, and so can I do it? Can I afford it? Well, let's run the plan and see what you have to give up, or do you have to give up anything? That type of thing. Or if somebody's spouse or themselves got ill, and we had this great stuff planned for our retirement, but now we need it for medical expenses. Can you help me readjust the plan? Right. So everybody should have a living plan that can be changed with your advisor. And if it can't be, then as I said on the other thing, then you're in the wrong place.
Thank you for sharing that. To follow up on that section, I think it would be helpful for the audience to hear from Antonio and Bill a story of how they were able to help an individual or family with a financial plan or an investment strategy, and then building on that, Glenn, if maybe you can share your own personal story.
And you guys are not, I know you don't have to give out names. So I'm just.
Absolutely. Yeah, no names, no names. I've had some really unique situations. I started my finance career in banking. I used to work for this little firm called Metro Bank in downtown Farmington Hills, and I will meet a lot of business owners. And through meeting those owners, you get to learn a lot about um, you learn a lot about business. You learn a lot about what their priorities are, and you see their successes, and you get to ask questions, and you learn, and you really glean a lot from their lives that really help you in turn provide again better service for them. Well, I had an interesting client situation before where I served them in the capacity of a mortgage. I wrote their mortgage for them some years ago, and really worked hard for them. So I remember when I started at Merrill Lynch, I called them up. They at the time they were in their residency program, and I called them up and I said, hey, listen, as you know, I'm at Merrill Lynch, and I really like to sit down and talk to you. Share a few ideas. Would you give me an opportunity to earn your investment business? And they said, sure. You worked hard for me. Come on out. So I go out and I talk to the client, and they're out of their residency now, and they're at a prominent hospital, and they're making really good money now. And I said, well, what do you have? What's going on? What do you have in place? I always start with, what do you have in place? What's important to you? And at the time, he said, well, I have a financial advisor. I said, okay, good. I do have a plan in place, but he had purchased a boat. And he said, gas is really expensive for my boat. And, so I've got this money that's been sitting in a savings account. How about we get started with, that investment? And this particular investment amount was less than what my firm encouraged us to work with. But because I knew the client in a past life, and because I knew that they were progressing through their career, I was able to get an exception to work with them. So we ended up, doing an investment strategy for them that really worked out. And I remember him calling me up and said, hey, listen, this money has been sitting in the bank making zero. And over the last 8 months, you've made enough money for me to gas up my boat. I thought it was kind of funny, because I hadn't really paid attention to what it costs to gas up a boat. But at any rate, so after doing that, what it turned into was, he said, I want you to look at some other things for me. He began to give me more money to invest. He began to open up and say, well, my company is, I'm an employee now, but I'm going to become an owner in a minute. So he began to ask me for more advice. I was then able to bring in some additional resources for him, tax-wise, to really, bolster up his financial plan. Then we began to write an insurance policy for his family to make sure that he was adequately, that his legacy was adequately taken care of. Then we looked at his college education plans for his kids. So what I took from it was, again, starting with someone who started with me with a very nominal amount, serving them, asking questions, walking with them, turned into them opening up and sharing more things with me to help them with. Really, he became one of my, I'm gonna use the word, he became one of my top 5 and clients over the last 10 years. So I think that, again, asking questions, being available, starting with what they have, allowed us to really, kind of grow, grow a relationship. I consider him a friend today. He and his family, they're my family. And, I think it's just something that organically happens when you take the time to talk with an advisor and have that person, spend some time with you.
Thank you for sharing that story. I think that is a very good point, and something that we talk about on a lot of these sessions, regardless of the topic, is that it's about creating a relationship, with your bank, with your financial investor, with whoever you're working with, uh, to manage, some aspect of your money or your insurance or whatever it is that you're working with. It's really about creating a relationship. It's not a transaction. Bill, do you have a story that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I have a quick couple stories. One of my largest clients, unfortunately, they've passed away now, but are two people that Kitty, my wife, and myself went to kindergarten with. And after they graduated from college, they had heard that I was in the securities business, and they called me and said, "We're starting a computer service business, and we need some help, and we need uh, to talk to you about our goals and what our needs and so forth." So, as with Antonio, a critical part of planning is this life insurance. Now they were borrowing, a fair amount of money to start this business, and the business was very, very successful. We covered them with life insurance in case it wasn't, and so they eventually sold the company about 15 years later, and got a pretty fair sum for the money for that. And then they had me, come in and we revamped their plan, needless to say, but they had a family limited partnership. And that's the other piece of the puzzle that we haven't touched upon today. Uh, uh, Antonio did a little bit, but, on people like that and which have a complicated situation, you want to bring in an attorney that is an expert in the field. And we have, I had one that I worked with, and he did a great job for a great many people down in Troy, Michigan, uh, uh, Julius Giamarco. And, he wasn't a client. I didn't have his account, but everybody he worked with did well and had some unique planning. Anyway, these people, after they sold their business, they put about $2 million into a family limited partnership, and they invested that money. And then, of course, as all of us do, they were getting older, and about uh, 5, 6 years ago, uh, both of them were uninsurable. And but then one day, Julius called them and said, "There's been a new ruling by the IRS, and I suggest we get the stocks out of the family limited partnership and do something that qualifies under the new rulings." So uh, I suggested life insurance, and they thought that was a great idea. The only problem was neither one of them were insurable. So every year we did the whole thing and uh, trying to get them insured. And one year they came back and they said, "Well, uh, Shirley's insurable, but Bob isn't." And so I called Julius. I called them. They said, "Bring the papers over today. We'll liquidate the family limited partnership and put it in that." Make a long story short, 3 years later, they both had died, and that money that was in the family limited partnership which at that point was about $3 million. Their insurance had leveraged that up to $18 million, and they had 3 kids. Every year, I get a nice gift from the 3 kids because it made their life change their life literally because none of them had much money. So that's one. The other one, and it's just a general thing, but when I was in the business, I did for many years business with a lot of baseball players. At one point, we had about 22 baseball players, and they were all clients of Scott Boras, who's the top baseball agent in the country. And we were introduced to him by one of his players. And so anyway, Scott's recommendation to his clients is the first $1 million you make, I'm going to give to Moeller, and it's going into a CD, because I never want to hear on the news at night one of my players going bankrupt because he bought cars and everything else. So I don't want you, and he talked to the players, don't want you to buy anything, do anything till you have $1 million in the bank, because you're in an area that could be big spenders and everything, and you can do that after you have $1 million in the bank and making a couple million a year, but not now. And so we had, at one point, we had 11 players on their first year, and we had $1 million in a bank CD. And, Scott never had a player that went bankrupt. By the way, he's the agent for our new phenom for the Tigers, the kid we just signed, the home run hitter. But anyway, that was interesting, and Scott was such a wise guy, because that's a interesting specialized situation. But it showed that in relationships you got to have people that trust you, and you got to trust the people. And I was reminded when I'll go back just a minute when Antonio was mentioning on the planning. I used to have a colleague, and probably Antonio has heard this several times, but he always used the phrase, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And it's a great saying for building a plan. And if you have a plan, you're going to get there. But if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there, and you could take the wrong road. That's all I had. I talked too much. I'm sorry.
No, those are good stories. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Glenn, do you want to share your personal story, and then I'll jump into some questions?
Yeah, I'm gonna try. I'll keep it short, but no, Bill, that was not long at all. I mean, those are the things that people need to hear, is how they can set up things in the long run, right? That it's not just about planning for themselves, but it's about planning for your kids after you.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, my personal story was, I didn't grow up in a household that just knew a whole bunch about investing. However, when I got to college, I started getting a little bit more intrigued. And the reason why I started getting more intrigued, because you start hearing some kids that, I went to school with, they were very wealthy. And you start hearing like, oh, I'll just take money out of my trust fund. And I'm like, trust fund? What are you, what are you talking about? Like, I have an idea, but, what's a trust fund? I'm on a football scholarship. And they're like, something would happen. They're like, oh, I'm just going to get it out of my trust, or I'm just going to do this. And I used to be like, what are these kids? Where are they getting all this money from? And come to find out, I think around probably I finally asked one of the students, like, what is this fund that you're talking about? They said, oh, my dad or my parents built this for me when I was like 1 year old. They started this fund for me. So when I went off to college, I had XYZ amount of money to spend. It pays for my college while I'm here, and it also pays for my living expenses. And I'm like, what? Like, what was my parents thinking, right? And I'm thinking this to myself, like, I just got gypped out of life, right? I'm upset, right? So I said, once I get a little bit, farther into this trust fund thing, and once I start having a better, understanding of it. But, you kind of go through, I was a business owner, in college, and then I was a business owner, just through my life. So probably I'll say about 13 years ago or so, I started getting a little bit more intrigued in it as, my income started increasing, even though I probably should have done things a little bit earlier. Then I read a book about compounded interest, that Benjamin Franklin talked about a lot. And then what really accelerated me was probably about, I'll say 10 years ago when I met Bill. And just having a conversation with him, and he would just ask me like little small questions. Like, and this is like when we first met and we're building a relationship, and Bill would say, so like, what are you, what type of stuff are you doing? Like, he never asked like to be my financial advisor. This is just like friendship, right? He just, what are you doing? you've had a business, what did you do with your money that you sold, your business, like, just asking me questions. And so at first it feels a little uncomfortable, but then when you really start thinking like, darn, he's really asking me good questions, because really I didn't know what I was doing. I had some things that I was doing, but I really didn't know, the type of things that were available to me. So I just started doing my own research and started just learning different things about investing. And I just started just investing my own money in things over the years. And so, financial advisors, what they're able to offer you is that they ask you questions about things that you probably don't even want to think about, because you think that you have the time, and they realize that the time that you think you have is the time that you actually can be making money. And once I figured that out in my head, that I need to get out of my own way of saying, oh, I have all this time to do this later, because not saying you can't do it later, but the earlier you do it, the more that your compounded interest is able to build up over time. And then when Bill started talking to me about inflation, I'm thinking to myself, oh, okay, well, I'm just giving an example, but say if you have $400,000 in the bank, and I think Antonio or Bill mentioned this earlier, I can't remember, but if you have $400,000 in the bank, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm sitting pretty good. If you lose your job, you're like, oh, I'm not really worried about it. I got some cash in the bank. But when you start thinking about retirement, so say if you're planning on retiring at 65, and you still only have about $400,000, but your lifestyle is $60,000 or $70,000 a year, right? Just your basic lifestyle. You divide that over 6 or 7 years, right? Your money's gone, right? Because it's not working for you. And so it's thinking about what's going to happen, and you don't want to work hard later. Like I say, work smarter, not harder. And financial planning is one of those things where, me personally, it's investing now so you can be smarter and actually enjoy your retirement later. So then you're still not working hard like you're working hard now, because some people can't retire when they turn 60. Some people are going to have to work in perpetuity because they kept spending everything they made and they didn't put it in the market and let it work for them. So that's my personal story, is building the relationships, asking questions, and understand they're asking you personal questions, not because they just want to know your business. They're trying to help you. And I think one of the biggest disconnects that really even happens in the minority community is a trust issue. Is that if I tell you something, you're going to take something from me. And that's not always the case. And I think that's why Bill made a good point. Like, you can go on those websites and interview these brokers and have conversations with them, and find out about fees and find out how stuff works and ask questions. Because if you don't ask questions and don't go in saying you know everything and you got it all figured out, I guess that was the other thing that I had to realize, is that I don't have it all figured out. I don't know everything. And people, just like I spend time in real estate and that's something that I know, I have to respect that these brokers and the financial advisors know what they're talking about. And I have to trust them, just like I'm asking people when I go into a bank and I say, I need a $10 million construction loan. I got to go and have that same type of confidence in that broker or the financial advisor to say, I need this. How can you help me get there? So my personal story is getting over fear, is being able to trust people and realizing that people are only asking questions when it comes to your financial advisors to help you have a strong future. And you only have to share information once you know that you trust them. And it's always good to start with something. So if you don't want to trust them with your whole portfolio, that's fine, or all your money, but start somewhere, whether that's investing $1,000 a month, $500 a month. Just get them started just to see what they can do, and you can always increase it over time as you build the relationship. And always remember this, you can have more than one advisor as well. So you can have 2 advisors working on your portfolio, and that's the other thing that some people fall into a trap, is that they don't know if they trust one fully 100% yet or the other one. And it might be good if you want to split up your investment, and then it gives you an ability to be able to look at both of them and then to kind of tier them against each other and say, okay, this one's giving me a little bit better return because they're doing these things. And then it will let you know if somebody's not doing you well. And then if you want to shift it all and go to one, then you can do that. So that's a little my personal story. I could share more, but I know we don't have that much time.
Thank you, Glenn. And just to kind of piggyback on what you were saying there, a question came in, two questions actually. I'm going to combine them. For people who are trying to decide, you know, how to divide up their budget, how much should they be paying off or focusing on paying off debt? How much should they be focusing on their financial growth plan? You know, how can they do that simultaneously? You know, basically how much should go towards savings, investments, and expenses? What is your rule of thumb?
Well, I'll just say one thing on the debt and the savings. You know, everybody should, number one, if they work for a company or a nonprofit that has a 403B or 401K, I don't care what you put in. If you put in $10 a week, put it in, because you automatically your money is doubled. But the first thing is, and I got, well, I didn't get booed out of a seminar at a hospital in Flint, but we did a seminar for the people. And the first thing I think anybody has to do is pay off, if they have credit cards with balances. I think I was pretty good when I was in the business before I retired, but I could not consistently promise a person that I could make them 16 to 19% a year. And that's what most of them are paying on their credit card balances. So I told them, I want you to go home and work on it for however long it takes, a month, a year, whatever. And once you got the interest debt off of your credit cards and you're down to zero debt, then let's come and talk, because I can't give you the rate you're making, that you're paying on the credit card balance you have. So anyway, and then from there you go. And I'll let Antonio take the rest of everything, because he is a terrific person, comprehensive.
Go Blue. I appreciate you. You know, I want to echo that. I was writing down when you were asking the question, you know, if you are at a place of employment and you have a retirement plan, you must enroll in that retirement plan. There are two benefits that you get out of it right away. The first is it's a pre-tax deduction. Okay, so it's the one thing that affects your tax bill at the end of the year immediately, simply by putting money away. And then once you establish however much you can put into that account, you know, based on your budget, then I think Bill said it perfectly. You got to attack those credit card bills, okay? Because the interest the interest on unsecured debt, okay? Unsecured debt is always in the double digits. Well, 99% of the time, it's probably a double-digit interest rate, somewhere from as low as 12% if you're at a credit union, maybe, but easily 29.99%. Okay, if you have a department store card. So you want to definitely try to get those things taken care of. The one thing that comes up, if I can modify or maybe add a question or a scenario that comes out of it, is that a lot of times clients want to invest. And one thing that I do when I'm talking with them is I ask them, okay, well, have you maxed out your retirement plan yet at work? And they say, no, I don't want to put all my money in my retirement plan. And as much as I understand that, the problem that I have with it fundamentally is that they haven't maxed out of their retirement plan, so they're not taking advantage of all that they can. They haven't paid off their credit cards. They still carry bills, you know, other bills, you know, what they're paying interest on, but they want to invest. So I try to get them to max out of that retirement plan. Again, take advantage of the tax laws, take advantage of deferred. You know, Glenn talked about compound interest. Well, there's no better compound interest that doesn't have a tax assessed to it when you earn it. The difference with a tax that happens on a CD or money in the bank is that money has that interest you have to pay taxes on currently, every year. But that compounding that happens in your retirement account is deferred until you retire. So if you can focus your money, I like to shift most of my clients that way, when it makes sense. And then from a budgetary standpoint, I think you asked, what percentage. That's a tough one to answer. I would have to go back to the goal. Okay. But I do like some rule of thumbs. I like 10%. 10% is a rule of thumb. I'm a faith-based person. So, 10% for tithing, 10% for saving, 10% for retirement. I think those are great starter places. And if you can put 10% in your retirement, if you can put 10% in the savings account, net of your paycheck, and still have enough money to aggressively pay down those high interest rate credit cards and reduce your debts and live and buy groceries and have some type of quality of life, then that's where you start. But it's really hard to even use a rule of thumb because people's circumstances may call for, just more or less. But since it's called a rule of thumb, if you can use it as a guide, maybe use the 10% rule, 10% in retirement, 10% in the savings, and then attack your debt after, with what's left. And if you find that you have excess, again, talking with an advisor, helping to evaluate your situation, making sure you have that rainy day fund, okay, making sure you have, money set aside for car repairs, healthcare, whatever that emergency may be, then you can focus on maybe increasing your investments, down the road. Did we catch all of those points that you were asking?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Glenn?
Okay. Yeah, thanks. I just want to add to that. You can invest your way out of debt. So if that's the question of, can I use investments to get out of debt? That's why they were using the point between the 16 and 29%, because there's no way that you'll be able to invest in the market to be able to cover the shortfall that you're having on the credit card interest on the unsecured debt. So just to break it down, that was just making it in lamest terms as possible, is that you cannot invest yourself out of debt. So remember to pay down the unsecured, like they mentioned earlier, as soon as possible.
And Glenn, can I add something? Because you as a business owner, I want to say that one of the, business owners are unique. They're the toughest clients to really engage in investment, okay, because they're doing their business.
Yes.
Okay. And you mentioned something about, and the way I characterized it was doing the business and running the business are two different activities. And so taking advice, getting advice from advisors, both investment, tax, insurance, that's critical for a successful business owner. If you're a business owner and you have not surrounded yourself with some advisors, make that the number one thing you do today or, tomorrow. Start adding some advisors, start talking to people so that you can really do the business better or make your activities are surrounded with what makes you money.
Yeah, if I didn't surround myself with Bill and his wife and other people that I have is just surrounded in my network, I can't tell you probably the amount of mistakes I probably would have made in my life, just even personally. So I'll cut that short because I can go on for days with that.
So the next question I'll just answer, and that is, how can we better position ourselves to take advantage of higher interest gaining accounts? And I'll just go back to 2 points. One, look at what's out there, do your research. Google is amazing. There's a lot of information on there, and you can look into, what the rates are on CDs and various accounts. as well as, to our first point, reach out to a financial advisor and start having those conversations. And, don't be afraid to talk to somebody about what's out there and what would best suit your needs based on what your goals are. And I really want to jump into this next question. How young should youth be engaged in financial planning and financial literacy? I'll let you kick that off, Glenn.
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, Bill mentioned it earlier about his grandkids, but something funny, I mean, something happened. I mean, my daughter is 18 months, right? And so she's like in the morning when I'm looking at the stock market when it opens, I'm, looking at my phone or my computer, and she comes and hangs out with me and looks at the computer or looks at my phone to see what I'm doing all the time. I mean, just watching me. And so one day, I'm in the middle of looking at a stock and I was wondering if I should buy it. And so she just reaches right over to my phone, clicks the buy tab, and I said, should I buy this stock? And then she looks at me and says, and she shakes her head, yes. I said, well, I don't know if I want to buy this stock. And then she's like, no, and I was like, no, I don't want to buy it. And she was like, yeah. She kept smiling. So I said, okay, if you want to buy the stock, go ahead. So she's real smart with how to use these technologies. So she clicks buy. And then I said, well, how many shares are we going to buy? Right. So at first, her number has always just been like 8, right? She would always push 8 on something. And for this particular time, she pressed 7. And I was like, oh, okay, 7 shares. And then she pressed it a couple more times. So then she had 7,777 shares for a total of 1 million, for a total of $1,200,000 and some thousand dollars. And I was like, whoa, Katie, okay, let's. I can't do, stuff. So I ended up buying, I don't know, I think 17 shares or whatever it was. Bought those shares. And so I talked to her about it. And it was funny because like 2 days later, the stock went up in that share by like 12%. And I was just like, wow. And so then I went back and I showed her. And then she just started laughing and thought it was funny. But so I'm going to keep this stock for her, for that particular stock, if it's still going to keep producing. And I'm going to let her know that that's going to be her stock. So as she grows up, that's always going to be there. And that's something that she bought at 18 months, right? And but that's something we're always going to have a conversation about. And we'll always be able to talk about that stock now for her foreseeable future because I don't plan on selling it.
I think if a kid has the ability to, if you believe in your kid or any kid for that matter, if you believe that they can learn something, I think her name was Miss Williams in DAPSEP. I had my girls in DAPSEP one year, and they were teaching them, I don't know, calculus or something. It was definitely like 2 or 3 years ahead. And one of the students raised their hand and says, "Hey, we're not learning that. Why are you teaching us this? We're not at that stage yet." And she said, "Because I believe that you can do it if I show you how." And so to me, if you believe that your kid or any kid for that matter, if you believe in them, if they have the cognitive ability to at least follow the conversation, then they're never too young. You just have to put some restrictions in place, obviously. You're investing with them, but teaching them starts when they're inside the beautiful vessel of their mother. You teach them before they even come out. You talk to them always. You share your thoughts. You share, what you do for a living. It's never too soon to get kids involved. But you don't teach them just about that you buy it for $1, it's worth $10 now. You teach them that sometimes you lose. Sometimes you pick a bad investment. Okay. Or sometimes, the investments go up and down. That's what we tell them. Hey, investments go up and down every day. That's what I tell my clients. I say, listen, you can look at this every day if you want, but you did hire me. I am charged with looking at it every day. If you want to look at it every day, go up and down, go ahead and stress yourself out. But investments go up and down every day, but when you choose an investment, you're hopefully choosing an investment because you believe that fundamentally is sound, and over a period of time, it's going to be positive for your overall portfolio. So I would teach the kids right away.
Absolutely. It is so important to start children and young people early in that discussion so that they're not just consumers, but they really understand that not only can they participate in buying a product, but they can also participate in having an ownership in that product, and understand that entrepreneurial mindset. It's not just about being a consumer, but they can actually own stock and have voting rights and participate in that. And so my youngest has been talking about the PlayStation and Xbox that are coming out later this year, and not just talking about wanting the games, but also wanting to look at the stock prices and talking about what the impact of those new games coming out is going to be on those stock prices, both short term and long term. And so, and he's only 12. So, the earlier you have those conversations with kids, I think the better.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. So we've gone over a little bit, and I think we're going to have to wrap it up. We had so much more to talk about. This was a really good conversation, but don't worry, we will be back again with the next another class. I just want to open the floor to everybody to maybe just share some final thoughts on this discussion about financial planning and investments that you'd like for the audience to take away. And I'll just start with Antonio.
I think it is vital for every individual, especially if you are married or you have kids, or even if your parents are alive. I think it is critical to have a financial plan in place for your life. And if you don't have kids and your parents are aging, hopefully they're aging, that you talk to your parents about their plan. That's something we really didn't talk about, in this particular session, but I think it's important that you have these conversations with your parents about their plan before, you're left with dealing with, the natural things that happen when our parents, pass away. So I think it's important to have a plan in place. There's nothing to fear. Gather as much information as you can, and then to make sure you have that plan in writing as well, so you can turn to it when you're feeling lost in the financial world.
Thank you, Antonio. Bill, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to leave with our audience?
Yeah, I would second what Antonio said. And just remember, the plan is a living plan, and it's a real guide. And also, anybody should research who they're going to go with and make sure they do what they say they're going to do. So I couldn't stress more what Antonio said, that everybody should have the plan. And it goes back to my old friend's simplistic thing of if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there, and you want the right road. So it's been a pleasure to be with all of you, and thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Glenn, any final words?
Yeah, like you say, it's a living plan. Do not fear what you don't know. The only way to learn it is to jump in. It is just like being, in school all over again. the more you educate yourself, the more you learn. That's why it's so important for, children or young people to learn financial literacy at such a young age. So then, like me, you're not catching up when you're, in your early 20s trying to figure things out that you probably could have started, when you were younger. Also, just even, just speaking of minorities in general, that's always had a lot of hesitation, in investing and talking to financial advisors. There's nothing wrong with sitting down, talking to people and learning. And also, when you ask questions to your financial advisors, if they're asking you questions about your business, it's okay for you to ask them questions about their business as well, because sometimes it's very hard for people to take you somewhere that they're not going themselves. And you'll realize that some financial advisors, some, not all, but some of them just work for a financial advisor firm, and they're just trying to find ways to sell products and make a living just like anyone else. But then you have those that are actually instituting things themselves. So don't be afraid to ask them questions as well. It's never too young. You're never too young to learn, and you're never too old to learn. Start today. Be empowered. Take this information that you have today. Sign up for the tinyurl.com/CFI Building Wealth to get more information, as we'll be sharing more stuff with you here in the future. Share this. This is all I'm asking is please share the information. Do not become a hoarder of information. If you have questions, ask. So thank you so much for being with us today. And hopefully that this information, helps you learn something today to get you started on a strong foundation.
Thank you. Thank you to all of our speakers that joined. Again, this session, Wealthy Wednesday, hosted by Communities First Inc. and sponsored by Fifth Third Bank. We want to thank everybody who registered and participated in the audience. And I'm not sure if I announced this, but we are giving away a prize for participation. So Ashney Young, I hope I'm saying that right, Ashney Young, please inbox Communities First Inc. with your contact information so that we can send a special gift to you for your participation in today's session. And just a note, we've got 2 sessions coming up, or our next 2 sessions coming up. Friday, July 3rd, we'll be talking about identity fraud safeguards for your small business. And Wednesday, July 8th, we will talk about insurance for families and individuals. So please tune in for those. And again, go to our website and check out our previous videos that we have for individuals and families focused on building a emergency fund, repairing credit, and then for small business owners, a session on insurance, as well as tools and resources. So thank you for joining us. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.